Hi everyone, it is Kimber, the Study Abroad Specialist, and in today's video, we are moving on to number 3 in the Remarkable Benefits of Study Abroad series. We're talking about the benefit of new challenges. So if you haven't had a chance to check out parts 1 and 2 of the Remarkable Benefits of Study Abroad series, go ahead and click into the description bar and you'll be able to find those videos there. Hopefully you will watch those after you watch this one. And so this series has been really great to put together. As I said, this is part 3 and there's 2 other parts after this, because asking about what the benefits of study abroad are is a question that I get all the time. So whether it is through my advising program, if you want to learn more about that, there's also a link in the description bar, or it's just through talking with other families that I work with, parents, students, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter their age either. They're interested in learning more about how study abroad can impact them. And so there are hundreds of benefits, but I tried to sum it up in 5 different parts of the ones that were beneficial to me when I was studying abroad. And also too, just thinking about, kind of over the years, what I've heard, it kept recurring. And so these 5 parts are kind of a summation of those different benefits. So homesickness is definitely on the top of my list for new challenges for study abroad students. And I'm sure you're asking, well, how is it a benefit? I would say that it's a benefit in the way that you can kind of use it to propel yourself forward. So we all know like what homesickness feels like. I think that probably for most students, even if you were younger and you, let's say, went to a sleepaway camp, or, you went away to grandma's for the summer or something like that, you experienced a form of homesickness then. But for most students, like the kind of pivotal point where they experience like their biggest touch point of homesickness is when they go off to college for the first time. And so it varies depending on what country you live in. Maybe you're going to be living in a dorm, maybe you're living in an apartment, it doesn't matter. But it's like that kind of first like week or 2 that you're away from your family and you sort of get there and you're getting established, like you're feeling all of these emotions inside, and there's nothing more that you want to do than just kind of like call home and be like, can you come and get me? And depending on where you are, obviously that's probably a little bit easier and more realistic if, maybe your family is just an hour or something away. But then once you're going to a different country, it's almost like once you get on that plane, you can't really turn it around. I mean, obviously you can go home if you want to, but it's like you sort of have to, sort of reckon with the feeling of, I am here and I have to make the best of this. And I know that I'm nervous. I know that I'm scared. And so for me, in thinking about that being a benefit, I think that it's really important to be able to press into that. And we've all been through it. So even for me, I remember particularly the first time that I was studying abroad in London for the very first time, it was just about this feeling of like, as I said before, like just realizing like, oh my goodness, like, I am hours and hours and millions or thousands, sorry, of miles away from my family. Sometimes it felt like millions of miles away. But, it's sort of realizing like, I can't just like jump on a plane and, go home whenever I want. I mean, I could to a certain extent, but I'm saying like, it's not like, oh, like I'm just going to like get here and then I'm going to turn right back around and go home just because I'm not feeling great. And so it's like, I think that you can definitely press into it by sort of acknowledging it. So definitely as you're moving forward in your study abroad program, you definitely want to acknowledge your homesickness. You also want to realize that, and this is kind of cliche, but that it does sort of range on a spectrum. So homesickness it doesn't look the same for everyone. Some people, depending on how much they've traveled even, they may get over it after a week or 2. I know I was like that because I had already traveled so much and I'd also gone to an out-of-state college. So I was used to it. But of course, you just get that feeling because you're in a new environment. Whereas for some students, maybe they have gone to college or university in their hometown. And so maybe their study abroad experience is the first time that they are sort of going away and they're experiencing homesickness at an entirely different level. And so I think that it's important to acknowledge it. I think that it's also important to talk about it with other people. So whether it be with your classmates, whether it be, online in some of the groups that you're in, definitely in the Live, Study, Learn Abroad Association, we have an entire module that talks about homesickness. And so definitely click into the description box to learn more about our memberships. And so you can join that. That's definitely going to be a support community available for you. But I think that it's really important just to kind of get it out there. And, don't be afraid to communicate, even to friends and family that, you feel maybe it's maybe for the first like 2 weeks that you're there, you need like that daily phone call from your mom, or you need to do like a Zoom call with, your parents just to like check in and see them. That sometimes happens, and it doesn't make you a weaker person because you need that extra support. Everyone needs that support in some way. And so I think that it's important to really lean into that. And then as you go along, as the dust sort of settles and you get into the rhythm of things, you have a routine, you're going to feel better. I know that there are some students who it never goes away, and I know how difficult that is. And as I said before in a previous video, we are eventually going to get into some of the downsides of study abroad and how a lot of students don't have a great experience. I definitely want to dive deeper into that. But just thinking about general homesickness, it typically goes away after a while, but you have to sort of see it as a challenge that you're going to have to overcome, especially in the beginning. So for the next challenge, which can be seen as a benefit, as you, sort of get into the study part of your study abroad program. So as you probably know by now, if you've been on this channel, as a study abroad channel, I often say that it can be a little bit tricky because a lot of times when students are talking about study abroad, they hear the word abroad, but they forget the word study. And so it's going to be a huge part of what you do. Obviously, you're there to learn new things, potentially learn a new language, see some different places, meet new people, experience all the culture. But definitely studying is the core part of why you're there. And depending on where you're going, most likely, more oftentimes than not, you're going to have to get used to a new academic system. And in a previous blog, which I've also linked down below in the description box, I talk about how when I first went to the UK, it was really difficult for me as an American student to get used to the fact of like the grading system and how, things were sort of like seen as, whereas like, for example, when I got a 75% on one of my first papers, like in the States, 75% is basically like the bare minimum. It's what we call like a C. And I know in some other countries it's, obviously different, but that's not good. And so, I was like terrified. And so I like talked to the professor after, and he's like, oh, like, I see what you're saying. Like, you're an American, so you're thinking about it from the American perspective, but this is actually a different grading scale. So you actually did a really good job. And I was like, okay, like, thank you. And I had not really connected the dots on that. So that is one of the things that I definitely like to also talk through with students before they go when I advise them is, let's like look through, once you kind of got accepted into your program, where you're going, let's look through and see what some of the standards are for the academics, just so that you can be ahead of the game, because it's already going to be stressful enough. You may experience some homesickness. You're going to be tired from the traveling. You're going to be, meeting new people. It's just going to be a new environment. And so once you start getting into your classes, if you can kind of already be ahead of the game, at least know like, this is the grading scale and this are kind of the expectations for the students. And this is how I should sort of go about setting out to do homework or do class projects, however that works. That's just going to help you even more. So for number 3, the next challenge that is also potentially a benefit is going to be centered around what you're going to be doing to need to survive, in particular, eating. And so I call it reshaping your taste buds, right? So depending on where you come from, you are used to a certain just general diet. Now, I don't mean on the micro level of, let's say, what you eat every day. So let's say you're a vegan or you're a vegetarian. I feel like I pick on vegans a lot. I'm sorry. It's something that I just kind of think about, because it's a different diet than a lot of people have. But that's on the micro level, but just in general. So for example, here in the US, a standard, kind of American diet is very different from a standard Canadian diet, is definitely very different from a standard European diet, and so on and so forth. And so wherever you're going, you need to sort of think about how you're going to make that part of your immersion process. It's going to be easy, obviously, because you have to eat to survive, but you sort of need to think about, like, maybe you're going to a country where, it's very heavy on food that you don't necessarily like. So it's very heavy on things like sauces and curries. And, it could be where, it just depends on where you're going. So definitely think that through. I mean, I definitely know, and some of it is stereotypical, but when I first went to the UK, I had already heard so many stories from a lot of friends who had lived in the UK or just traveled there before I did, talking about the food and how horrible it was. And the main reason for that is because, I actually, once I got there and actually, started learning to shape my palate to it, I actually didn't dislike it a lot, because I realized I was actually tasting the food and not all of the cover up. Because if you know anything about the American diet, there's so many different preservatives and so much salt and so much sugar and so much everything in it that you don't actually sometimes get to taste the actual real food. And so it's like, English food was not as horrible as a lot of people say, at least to me. But I get why people think that, is because it's really bland, especially if you are used to an American diet where everything is there's so many different things in there mixed up that you don't realize that there's actual real food under there. So it's like, when you do go to a place where there's real food, you're like, what is this stuff? And so, like, depending on where you're going, that's something that you may need to think about. You also, too, along those lines, want to think about what the sort of cultural aspects are around, food, and also, in terms of like socializing with food, thinking about things like that, because that is really important. So are you going to a culture where, people go out to eat every night? Are you going into a situation where it's more of a sort of takeaway or fast food culture? Are you going into a place where maybe, let's say you are, coming from a country like China or like Germany or something like that, and you're coming into an environment like the US, where, for example, on a lot of, or most college campuses and university campuses here, we have dorms. And so that's a lot different from the European model or the Asian model a lot of times, right? So it's like you're suddenly, like, sort of having this communal living where you're going down and having to, do like the buffet every single day. That may be a little bit weird for you. So definitely sort of think about how that's going to impact you. And also, too, like, if you have specific dietary needs, you're going to need to figure out if you can access what you are going to need in your host country, because every country is not created equally. So there are some countries that may not be as accommodating to the vegans, shout out to the vegans again, or to the vegetarians, or to someone that has a peanut allergy or something like that. We have to remember that, depending on where you are, there's different regulations, there's different kind of rules and different things around, how food is created and prepared and manufactured. So definitely consider that if you're going to have something that is a special need, you need to understand how you're going to be getting that, because we don't want you to get in a situation where you can't have what you need because you need it to survive. So definitely consider that as you work on retraining your taste buds, trying some new foods, and getting excited about immersing yourself in the culture through taste. Okay, and so that is it for the benefits of new challenges. I feel like I always end my videos the same way, but I hope that this has been very helpful to whoever is watching this. I know that when you're thinking about challenges, it gets really scary, because it's like, no one wants to feel out of their comfort zone, no matter what people say. I know that for a lot of times, for example, when people are in, job interviews or whatever, they come up with like the same line of, oh, I just want to get out of my comfort zone. Like, no one really wants to get out of their comfort zone. You either have to be pushed out of your comfort zone, or you have to, sort of move yourself out of your comfort zone. And as someone who has done both of those things, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, I can tell you that, a lot of times the good feeling of the challenge doesn't always come right away. So a lot of times, it may be where you're going through something and you may not see the benefit of that for 5-6 years. I've been there, but it's going to help you in the end. I can promise you, as long as you're pushing yourself forward and making sure that you are challenging yourself and you're feeling like you are growing as a person, as a student, as someone who is going to be eventually, working as part of a community and contributing, you definitely want to do that. It's only going to be for the better. So if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe, please also share it with someone else who you know who is planning to study abroad. We are all about building community here. As I said before, the Live, Study, Learn Abroad Association was made to build a community of study abroad students from all around the world. And we are coming back for our next intake in August of 2021 with hopes and prayers that everyone is able to get started again with study abroad, having a lot of fun overseas, wherever they're planning to go. And so definitely share this video, like this video, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.